I want a divorce. Joelle Miller carefully examined Rebecca Lloyd's Twitter feed, studying each video with a keen eye, eager to see Rebecca's boyfriend's face. Rebecca, the girl in the videos, displayed a sweet and delicate aura in her simple white outfit. Although not an extraordinary beauty, she had an authentic simplicity and a genuinely charming smile that made her special. Soon, she discovered that on memorable occasions like Christmas Eve, Valentine's Day, and even her birthday, Rebecca was with Adrian Miller, her supposed husband, who hadn't attended any important events in the past 3 years. Rebecca's happy narratives and everyday details with her boyfriend were more than enough to cause a feeling of melancholy in Joelle. See this. He always saves the juiciest piece of watermelon for me. Even when he comes home late, he always remembers to bring me something. And look at this! Surprise! He brought me a protection charm from the church. The account was named Countdown to Death, being the only account Joelle followed. When she was about to ponder the threatening name, the bathroom door opened. Then Adrian appeared in the dimly lit environment. Instinctively, Joelle locked her phone and looked at him, completely lost in thought. It had been quite some time since she last saw Adrian. He wasn't here by choice tonight. His grandmother, Irene Miller, was ill and anxious for a great-grandchild, which made Adrian return. Otherwise, it was quite likely he would never have come back. In 3 years of marriage, Adrian almost never showed up at home, preferring to spend most of his time at Oak Villas. Everyone knew he harbored no feelings for Joelle, who found herself trapped in a marriage that only existed on paper. I'll give you only one chance. Whether you end up pregnant or not will depend on fate, Adrian stated, his voice deep and striking. What did that mean? Before Joelle could process everything, Adrian grabbed her ankle and pulled her close. Joelle, dominated by fear, turned pale. Adrian, stop! I don't want... She couldn't finish the sentence, being interrupted by her own desperate struggle. Being in such a situation with the man she loved filled her with humiliation and dread. With an ironic smile, Adrian commented, "You had the audacity to drug me once, so you should know this day would come. Just endure it now." With those heavy words, Joelle's eyes filled with tears, her eyelashes fluttering like wounded butterflies. Observing his severe countenance, she spoke with a trembling voice. "Things weren't what you think." However, her protest was cut short. Pain consumed her, making her resistance disappear as despair invaded her. Finally, she gave up fighting. "You've learned. Acting difficult is much more fun than just lying there like a dead fish." His voice was hoarse and full of contempt. After the shower, he left without looking back, as if wanting to distance himself as quickly as possible. Before and after, those ritualistic showers seemed to wash him of her, as if she were a stain on his soul. Joelle, in turn, struggled to understand what her position was in his life. Was she just a toy to satisfy him? Or was she merely a piece to meet his family's expectations for an heir? The window was open at that moment, letting in a cold, cutting wind. Joelle shivered, pulling the blanket tighter around her body. However, it wasn't just the cold that made her tremble. Her heart was shattered, with a cold and relentless wind passing through the open wound. The man she had been in love with for nearly 8 years was nothing but a stranger now. 3 years ago, during an elegant Miller family banquet, Joelle drank too much. When she woke up, Adrian was beside her. Before she even had time to gather her thoughts, her brother and several Miller family members burst in. There was no way to undo what had already happened. With that, Adrian's grandmother took control of the situation and arranged the marriage. All this time, Adrian believed that Joelle had drugged him to trap him with her. Before, Joelle didn't understand why Adrian harbored such deep hostility. After all, they grew up together. But now she finally understood. To Adrian, she was nothing more than an evil woman who ruined his relationship with Rebecca. At that moment, she thought about how perfect Adrian seemed in Rebecca's videos, always so kind and attentive. It was then that she realized he might never show the same tenderness to her. Finally, Joelle could no longer suppress her tears and broke down in a fit of crying. That night, her sleep was troubled and restless. In the last hours, she found herself dreaming of the early days, a time when there were no fights between her and Adrian. Awakened by her restless sleep, Joelle got up much earlier than normal. After freshening up, she put on casual clothes and went downstairs. Leah Jenkins, the oldest maid, spotted Joelle coming down and quickly set the table for breakfast, knowing all her preferences well. With that, Joelle enjoyed her breakfast peacefully, eating slowly. "Mrs. Miller, why didn't you persuade Mr. Miller to stay a little longer here last night? After all, he doesn't come home often," Leah observed, with a tone that expressed empathy for Joelle. Leah had worked for the Miller family for many years, seeing Joelle and Adrian transform from childhood friends into enemies. An expression of discomfort quickly passed across Joelle's face before she hid it with a calm smile. "I tried, but he didn't want to stay," she admitted. His feelings were at Oak Villas, where the woman he truly loved lived. After hesitating briefly, Leah said cautiously, "Perhaps this is because Mr. Miller is heavily engaged in company matters. Managing a business of that magnitude consumes a lot of his time." After being put in charge of caring for Joelle 3 years ago, Leah began to understand the complexities of this marriage like no one else. This perception awakened genuine sympathy for Joelle. As Joelle bit into the toast, her eyelashes trembled, her eyes moistening slightly from emotional tension. Although Adrian was always busy, he always found time for Rebecca. Moreover, he made a point of visiting the Redemption Church to get a protection charm for her. Even with a packed schedule, he never gave up spending holidays with her. At that moment, Joelle's phone began to ring, breaking the silence. When Leah left the dining room, Joelle picked up her phone and noticed it was a call from her friend, Catherine Nash. "I want a divorce, Catherine," Joelle said hoarsely after answering. Chapter 2. Do you plan to sleep on the streets? After the divorce, finding no point in extending the relationship further, Joelle decided it was better to get divorced. After a moment of confused silence, Catherine burst out laughing. "Will you get half of Adrian's assets? Oh my God! Joelle, you're one step away from becoming a billionaire." "No, that won't be possible." On her wedding day to Adrian, Joelle signed an agreement. If they got divorced, she would be entitled to nothing. "Then why do you want a divorce? Stay married to him." Joelle remembered Adrian's rudeness the previous night and the humiliation that followed. She had been extremely naive in the past, thinking that her love for Adrian would make her endure any difficulty. But now, looking back, she realized how foolish she had been. Did suffering make Adrian love her? Obviously not. True love would never allow her to suffer. Unable to contain herself, Joelle mocked herself and decided to change the subject. "By the way, do you remember the favor I asked last time?" "Yes, that's what I was going to tell you about. You asked me to keep an eye out for a vacancy. An opportunity came up for you to give violin lessons to a student. But I must say, this will be a waste of your talent." "It's okay," Joelle said, smiling slightly. "It won't be a waste at all. After all, I've been a housewife for 3 years. Just having someone willing to hire me is enough." "How is it not a waste? You were very close to joining an international orchestra if it weren't for the marriage." Catherine hesitated, taken by indignation for her friend. After getting married, Joelle could no longer work. These wealthy families clung to antiquated traditions. The whole situation was complete nonsense. 3 years ago, Joelle was at the peak of her career as a violinist. However, the rigid traditions of the Miller family prevented her from making any public performances. On her first day of marriage, Adrian's mother told her, "You don't need to worry about working. Adrian will take care of you. Your only function is to have children and take care of your husband." After ending the call with Catherine, Joelle went upstairs, went to the office and picked up her violin, which had been forgotten for a long time. She received that violin from her father as an 18th birthday gift. Unfortunately, shortly after receiving the violin, her father had a stroke and fell into a coma. With that, her older brother became responsible for supporting the family, allowing her to pursue her dream of playing violin without worries. While reflecting on the past, Joelle drew the bow across the strings. A few years ago, an accident injured her wrist, which made her stop playing since then. Now, as she played, she felt a strong pain shoot through her wrist, but she continued, relying on her muscle memory to play a short melody. In the end, she smiled bitterly, feeling that the melody sounded horrible. At that instant, Leah's voice sounded at the door, full of surprise and enthusiasm. "Sir, you've returned." In her heart, Leah felt relieved by Adrian's return, thinking this indicated he still cared about Joelle. Perhaps, if Joelle expressed herself gently, their relationship could improve. Joelle, in turn, was surprised. Adrian rarely appeared at home during the day. She had just put down the violin when the door was opened. Standing at the door, Adrian displayed his tall and imposing stature. Frowning slightly, he examined her with his gaze. He then remembered that Joelle had learned to play the violin as a child and that her talent had been praised by a famous teacher. But for some reason, she gave up playing. Having heard from outside, he realized that her performance was somewhat mediocre. How could anyone have praised her talent? Joelle watched him for a few moments before tilting her head and putting the violin back in the case. In the next second, she asked in a low voice, "What brings you here? Do you need something?" "I just came to get something and let you know that we should visit Grandma tomorrow," Adrian commented coldly. Making visits to grandmother at least once a month was one of the family traditions, and tomorrow would be the day. If it weren't for this commitment, Adrian wouldn't have returned. After all, Irene would end up upset if he and Joelle didn't show up together. A bitter smile appeared on Joelle's lips, who knew the Miller family rules better than Adrian and always followed them. Even Irene, known for her severity, couldn't point out any flaw in her. "I didn't forget." "I'm relieved to see that you didn't forget either," Joelle commented. Her tone carried a subtle accusation, making Adrian smile disdainfully. For a moment, a contained anger began to intensify inside him. Without uttering another word, he went straight to the closet looking for something. Although he rarely came home, Joelle still kept his wardrobe in perfect order, with clean, ironed and well-organized clothes. She had the feeling that her function was limited to doing housework, something Leah could also do. Perhaps her only advantage was the fact that she was younger and more attractive than Leah. Joelle carefully watched Adrian's movements, whose ring finger was empty. The wedding ring was not present. Seeing that, she felt an intense pain strike her heart. "I want to divorce Adrian," Joelle suddenly announced, her voice soft as a light breeze. Uttering these words drained all her strength, but she felt a strange relief envelop her. Smiling disdainfully, Adrian turned to her and said, "Think carefully before asking for something like that. The Watson family is already at its limit. Without my help, do you intend to sleep on the streets with your brother after the divorce?" With the fall of the Watson family, Joelle stopped being respected and became the target of mockery. The Miller family considered her insignificant, seeing her and her brother as persistent parasites they couldn't get rid of. Even intimate moments with Adrian made her feel humiliated. Biting her lower lip, Joelle straightened up and said, "I rented a place. Even if I had to sleep on the streets, the responsibility would be entirely mine." The only thing she wanted was Adrian's respect. But 3 years of imprisonment had worn down her pride and dignity. And where did you get money to rent anything? If your intention was to be independent, you shouldn't have used a single cent from the Miller family. With his back turned to Joelle, Adrian found the lost ring in a hole and held it. However, his gesture went unnoticed by Joelle. His statement left her breathless. Yes, she rented the place with her meager savings. However, since she was married to Adrian, shouldn't what belonged to her also belong to him? Moreover, the financial support Adrian had offered to the Watson family over the years amounted to a considerable sum. Joelle never liked the idea of being indebted to Adrian, but her debt to him was the most intense. If they really got divorced, it was quite likely he would cut off all financial support to the Watson family. Was he trying to insinuate that she should leave the marriage empty-handed? As Adrian turned to leave, Joelle called out to him with her little remaining dignity. I have legal rights in this marriage, and I demand what is rightfully mine. But don't worry, because I don't want much, just enough to help the Watson group get through this crisis. Adrian stopped, his countenance becoming somber, his lips closed in a narrow line, his jaw tensing. This was a clear indication of his rising anger. Even though Joelle was mentally prepared, the force of his anger left her without reaction. With each second under his rigid gaze, her anxiety intensified. It was then that Adrian's phone began to ring. After taking it from his pocket, he walked away to answer. Adrian. Chapter 3. I will maintain my dignity. Adrian's irritation was so intense it seemed to float in the air like static. If your brother needs money, send him to look for the Miller Group. But it's not about that, Joelle countered. He misunderstood her. Joelle ran after him, her heart beating hard with urgency. I want a divorce, Adrian. Faced with such a statement, Adrian stopped on the stairs and turned his face, the phone in his hand also falling silent. Measuring 6 feet 3 inches, he was significantly taller than Joelle. He stared at her coldly, and when he spoke, his voice was full of disdain. Joelle, can't you imagine a more engaging game than this endless push and pull? Since you're proposing divorce, why don't you tell Grandma? Otherwise, never make me hear that word from you again. Then he slammed the door behind him, putting an end to the discussion. Feeling her legs weaken, Joelle leaned against the wall and slid to the floor, a bitter smile appearing on her lips. She knew that the entire marriage was arranged by Irene, and that Adrian had no choice but to accept. In that case, if she really wanted a divorce, talking to Irene would be the best approach. However, a small, deluded part of her continued to hope that she and Adrian were a real couple. It was for this reason that she decided to talk to him first. However, she neglected a fundamental point. Adrian never really wanted to marry her. From the beginning, his hesitation was evident, even if she tried to ignore it. His last words not only expressed contempt, but also sounded like an order. If she was really serious, she should face Irene face to face. With that, Joelle took a bath, changed clothes, and prepared to see Irene. Irene was an extremely severe woman, authoritarian and feared by everyone in the family. She commanded with a firm hand, and any disobedience was unacceptable. However, she had a special bond with Joelle. One of the reasons Joelle agreed to marry Adrian was to fulfill Irene's expectations. At first, she wanted to take care of Adrian, create a home, and ensure that Irene departed without regrets. But now, she could no longer bear it. Seeing Adrian interested in another woman made Joelle feel a wave of bitterness that almost overcame her. She knew Adrian felt nothing for her, and that he would never develop any feelings. When she was preparing to leave, her phone rang. It was a call from her brother, Sean Watson. "Sean, did something happen? Mrs. Miller." It was Sean's assistant, speaking with an alarmed voice, something unprecedented for Joelle. A chill ran through her body, and she squeezed the phone tighter as she stopped on the last step. Where is Sean? What happened to him? Last night, Mr. Watson was at a business meeting where he was forced to drink too much. At first, he should have returned home right after, but Eric Lloyd convinced him to go to a hot spring. Joelle stood still, anger coursing through her body. Didn't Eric realize that something like this could kill him? Eric is a scoundrel. He's been using his influence since his father and brother worked as drivers for the Miller family. Mrs. Miller, you need to come as quickly as possible. Mr. Watson is still in surgery, and the doctors have already given 2 warnings about his condition being critical. I couldn't keep waiting, so I called you. Suddenly, his voice became faltering, almost falling into tears. Joelle knew that if the situation weren't extremely serious, he wouldn't have gotten in touch. Sean always made a point of shielding her from bad news, regardless of how bleak the situations were. For the assistant to have been so shaken, it was likely that Sean's life was at risk. At that moment, Joelle had the feeling that the world around her was closing in, while her voice remained stuck in her throat. She then missteps on the last step, and fell heavily to the floor, twisting her ankle abruptly. The intense pain brought her back to the present, making her eyes fill with tears. "Oh no. Mrs. Miller, how can you be so careless?" Leah exclaimed, helping Joelle get up quickly. Joelle, in turn, just held Leah's arm, her vision blurred by tears. She tried to express herself, however. The words came out in a halting way, suffocated by sobs. "My brother. I need to go to the hospital to see him." Noticing the urgency in her tone, Leah said without any hesitation, "All right. Don't worry. I'll ask the driver to take you right now." Leah was a loyal and skilled maid who had dedicated many years of her life to serving the Miller family. About 5 minutes later, the car was already parked in front of the villa. When Joelle was preparing to get in the car, she turned to Leah and said, "Please don't tell Irene anything that happened. I don't want to worry her." Leah felt her heart warm with such a request. Even in her weakened state and with her face soaked in tears, Joelle still worried about Irene's well-being. She really was a unique and extraordinary young woman. "Don't worry, Mrs. Miller. I know what needs to be done. Now go see your brother." When Joelle arrived at the hospital, Sean had just come out of surgery. Coming face to face with Sean connected to various wires and tubes, the assistant almost collapsed to the floor. Approaching, Joelle saw him kneeling against the wall with reddened eyes devoid of any emotion. At that instant, she suppressed the desire to criticize him for not having protected Sean properly. After all, she could do that later. As soon as Sean's condition became stable, Joelle took the assistant to a more private place and asked, "Tell me, how did it all happen?" With a worried countenance, the assistant hesitated briefly before answering. "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Watson expressly asked that we not involve you in business matters. But this is a matter of life and death, so do you really think leaving me in the dark is still an option?" Losing patience, Joelle turned her back to leave. "It's no use, Mrs. Miller." With a desperate tone, the assistant continued. "After the incident with your father, Mr. Watson took full responsibility for the Watson Group. He has been striving to preserve the family's reputation so that your life in the Miller family would be more peaceful. Over 3 years, Sean worked intensely to keep the family together. However, if it weren't for Adrian's financial help, his attempts would have failed long ago. Sean wanted Joelle to live comfortably, but even with his hard work, he never managed to get her the respect she deserved from her husband. Regardless of how much Sean tried, Joelle continued to be despised by the Miller family. Although enraged, Joelle knew she had no way to change her situation. After taking a deep breath, she asked, "Didn't you talk about my relationship with Adrian?" She believed that joining the Miller family could give Sean the strength needed to stand firm. Mr. Watson refuses to talk about this matter. He's afraid it will make your life even more complicated. Joelle smiled bitterly. From the beginning, she could never equal Adrian. It wasn't surprising that he despised her after all. She could barely accept herself. Just an hour ago, she decided to ask for a divorce. But now, she clung to Adrian's name, determined to make Sean's life easier. Tell Sean that I am Adrian Miller's wife, personally chosen by Irene. As long as I remain Mrs. Miller, I will maintain my dignity before the Miller family. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. Turning around, Joelle came face to face with Adrian's icy eyes. Next to him was a young woman of delicate appearance, with large, innocent eyes, holding on to him. Adrian watched Joelle with an icy and disdainful look, as if seeing her there was a great burden. At that moment, he realized that Joelle didn't really intend to get divorced. The woman who had spoken with such certainty about leaving everything was now there, proudly flaunting her title of Mrs. Miller. Her divorce request was nothing more than a trick, similar to a lover's quarrel that ended in meaningless threats. That manipulative woman had drugged him so he would marry her. With these dishonest methods, how could she simply abandon this union? After all, this marriage functioned as a lifeline for her struggling family. He made an annual donation of $100 million to the Watson Group. Therefore, it would be a big mistake if Joelle decided to divorce him and risk losing all of this. Chapter 4. She finally made up her mind. Joelle had become accustomed to Adrian's coldness and indifference long ago. She silently observed their intertwined arms, while her thoughts drifted to the happy moments recorded in Rebecca's videos, which provoked envy in many. What a perfect couple. The thought struck Joelle like a blow. "Please, Joelle, don't misunderstand me," Rebecca said quickly, while removing her hand from Adrian's arm. "I don't feel very well, which prevented me from walking normally. Adrian was just helping me out of politeness." Smiling forcedly, Joelle purposely ignored Rebecca's explanation and turned to Adrian, asking, "What are you doing at the hospital?" "Eric is here too," Rebecca interrupted, keeping her arms crossed in front of her body, looking like a regretful child. "Also, I would like to apologize to you, Joelle. I'm sorry that Eric acted so carelessly as to put your brother in the hospital." Without any hesitation, Joelle countered, "Carelessly. Your brother almost caused my brother's death, and you really believe that a simple apology is enough to make up for that?" Shrinking back, Rebecca sought Adrian's sleeve for support. When Adrian spoke, his voice sounded as cold as winter. "Enough, Joelle. It wasn't on purpose." Then he turned to Rebecca and adopted a gentle tone when saying, "We better go. Didn't you come to see how Eric is?" At that instant, an icy understanding took hold of Joelle, who naively hoped that Adrian was only there to check on Sean. However, his presence was only due to Rebecca to see Eric. She knew she couldn't count on Adrian to defend her. Even if he made a visit to Sean, it would only be out of a sense of obligation, nothing more. "Rebecca, make sure I won't ignore Eric's actions," Joelle stated. Suddenly, Rebecca lost the firmness in her legs and collapsed against Adrian's chest, who quickly held her, keeping her close to him. "Joelle, Eric didn't intend to cause any harm. Besides, he's also hospitalized." "Is he dead by any chance? Otherwise, he'll have to bear the consequences of what he did." Joelle rarely showed aggression, but today was an exception. Sean was practically the only family she still had. Her father, affected by a stroke, was in a vegetative state with no prospects of recovery, while her mother died in a car accident. So, since she was 18, it had been just her and Sean, facing the world's challenges side by side. In the most difficult moments, Sean had borne the weight alone, leaving Joelle free to dedicate herself to the violin. Now, the idea of being without him became equally intolerable. Adrian's patience ran out, and his eyes turned cold when they fixed on Joelle. "Joelle, how can you say something like that?" Rebecca asked with disbelief. Her voice choked. Losing patience, Adrian stared coldly at Joelle and asked, "What do you want?" "Sean has already received 2 warnings about his condition being critical." "But what about Eric?" Rebecca gasped, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Please, Joelle, he's my only brother. Show a little mercy, please." Before Joelle had a chance to respond, Rebecca fainted, no longer allowing discussion. Adrian then lifted Rebecca in his arms, his eyes reflecting an icy reproach as he directed one last look at Joelle. Then he walked away, leaving Joelle motionless, unable to move or think, as if time had stopped. Before getting married, she was the beloved girl, but afterward she became just Adrian's servant. Now, looking back, she realized how naive she had been. She used to be a very proud person, but now she endures all kinds of complaints just to please her husband. How pathetic. 3 years have passed, it's time to divorce and start a new life. What will happen next?